Best Available Podcast, episode 23, January 11th, 2021. We're already a couple weeks in to the brand new year, and it's been fun. There's been a lot of things going on already in the first 11 days, but we're not going to get into that. What we have to talk about is super wildcard weekend. Oh, yeah, super wildcard weekend. There's a lot of excitement over the 6 games that were played, and we're going to get into that. We do not have any movies to talk about this week, so if you tuned into this just to listen to us talk about movies, we apologize. But if you want to get your fix on all pop culture, go check out Jabberjays, because their second season has just started up. They got a new intro song. They got a new set. They're doing YouTube videos now, everything. So be sure to check that out. Their first episode of the second season just dropped today. Soundtown, their second season just started last Thursday, so they'll be with us again for, I think, about another 9 weeks or so. They got a lot of great interviews coming up, so be sure to check them out. And forward progress tonight, as you listen to this episode will be out a little earlier, so tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, they will be going live on Instagram, so be sure to check that out, and their podcast will be coming back soon as well. Before we get into the fun sports that we're going to talk about, Matt, how have things been in your world since the last episode that we recorded?
Pretty good. Pretty good. Trying to hit on some of the New Year's resolutions as I go through. Big one this year was to read more, right? So I've been starting out with a Star Wars book, a Star Wars fiction, its own little genre there. You can call me a nerd. I don't care. Glenn's probably listening and saying, wow, Matt, I'm not going to go that far to read the books. Because he said that to me. He's like, that sounds intense to read the books a long time ago. I'm like, yeah, I'm going that far. They're good. Going to switch over to a Patriots book eventually, but I tried to start off with something that I liked, which was Star Wars. I'm like 8 chapters in, which is 8 more chapters of anything that I read all of last year, so we're already off to a better start. So that's good. The 2021 bingo card's starting to fill up in terms of, crazy stuff that went on. But as you mentioned, we're going to talk about super wildcard weekend, Ryan. It wasn't very super, in my opinion. It's just 2 more games. And it wasn't very super.
I disagree, and we'll get into it. You brought up reading, and I have also started reading a new book. That was also one of my things that I want to do more this year. I started reading more late last year just because I needed something to occupy my time, and I want that to carry into this year. I want to keep that momentum. So the first book of 2021 that I am reading is Alex Trebek, The Answer Is, Reflections on My Life, and it was his last episode aired on last Friday, and it was definitely bittersweet. So I guess the Ken Jennings episodes start tonight. I'm interested to see how that goes. For my money, I really would rather see LeVar Burton as the host. I hope he gets the opportunity at some point. I think that for those of you that, if the name doesn't register, he was the Reading Rainbow guy. He was on Star Trek. He's done a lot of stuff. I would love to see him be the host. But yeah, reading is a good thing. So the lesson to take away from today's Best Available podcast is to read. Reading is magical and fun. And yeah, Matt, let me ask you this. We had to read books throughout our entire lives in school, middle school, high school, college. How many of those books would you say you actually read 100% of the way through that we were supposed to read?
Under 5%.
Okay.
Under 5%. There was one that you and I had to read fall semester of senior year, Ryan. If you remember this book, I won't say it. It was for a class about something we're doing right now, right?
Wow.
And I can't say I read that book at all. It's
I'll
lost
never
my
forget
interest
it.
Right from the start.
I'll never forget one high school teacher. He's going to remain nameless, but he said one of the things I took away from this class the most, it wasn't like pertinent to the topic, but he said, you all eventually have to learn how to play the game of school. Like there's a game of life. Well, you got to learn how to play the game of school. And I took that to heart, and I learned that there's more effective uses of my time that aren't reading assigned books all the way through. There's other ways to get around that. So I'm proud to say that my percentage is probably similar to yours. I can't remember the last time in my schooling years I actually read a book. Actually, no, I can. I think my senior year of high school with Jay Flanagan, we had to read a book and of our choosing out of his personal library in the back of the classroom. And I picked the Red Sox book Faithful, which was a good read. I don't know why, but I did, and it was worth my time. But yeah, it's funny. So some of the books that I read last year were actually books I was supposed to read in school. I was like, oh, wow, these are actually really good. I wish I read these at the time, but yeah. So another piece of advice to everyone out there, learn how to play the game of school. Your life will be forever better.
Coach Flanagan's class that you referenced in high school, that was probably the last time I read a book start to finish, because he would set out time every Friday for us to read for basically the whole class. And I would never have had any motivation to read at any other point because we were there and we had to do something kind of thing. And I got a lot of books out of the way that year, right? I got one about Rich Rodriguez in Michigan. There's another Red Sox book, a different one from what you read. I think I read one about Red Auerbach and the Celtics. So I think that's the formula. If you want to get kids to read, you got to force them to in school, but with books they want to, because he allowed us to bring in our own books, which is what I think really helped out. And I get the whole school curriculum thing. And I will say this, a lot of the books earlier on in our schooling days, Ryan, were a lot more interesting than what we got in college, or at least in the later years. Because it's really hard for me to kind of decipher really old stuff and get into it. Like I can't get into, and I know it's not a book, but like I can't get into Shakespeare. I can't get into, what was it, Gilgamesh? What was some of the other stuff in like, English class that we had to read in high school? Like I can't get into that. I can't relate to anything. Like it's different when I pick up like a Star Wars book. Like I immediately know the characters, the setting. I could get into that. Or a nonfiction book too. But like, I don't know. I understand the point of why it's done, but I can't get involved in like Shakespeare.
Yeah, it's just the way those books are written. I mean, I understand it was a different time. Things are written a different way, but like trying to get through Beowulf or King Lear or anything else like that, I'll say maybe if I read them now without having to write a 7-page paper or having to give a group presentation on it, maybe it'd be different. Maybe I'd actually find the value in it. But I think that's the main issue, and you kind of brought it up. If you're reading something you want to read and there's nothing hanging over your head about something you have to do, it's more enjoyable. But when you know in the back of your head you have to try to decipher some type of meaning about what the author really means, and you have to participate in class conversations, and you have to read multiple pages of a book by a certain date to be able to do assignments. That's not fun.
You know what was the worst? Is when we would do the Shakespeare stuff or like the play style things, and we would do them in class. We would read them like a live table read in class. And then you would like kind of get a little nervous when you get to your part because you're like, I don't want to screw up my line kind of thing. And like, you always feel bad for the guy that got like Romeo or like, some main character that had a lot of lines. And that was the worst part about all of it, Ryan, in my opinion, was the fact that not only did we have to read it, but we had to act it. And then there would be the once in a while thing of sound a little more interested in what you're saying, guys. Come on. I'm like, dude, it's 10 o'clock in the morning. It's 20 degrees outside and it's, January. No one wants to read that. That was the worst part for me, is when we had to do the table reads.
I'm not telling teachers how to do their job, because they have a very difficult job to try to come up with creative lesson plans day in and day out. But those table reads did not help me gather anything from the book. I can't follow along when you have someone up at the front who's really too far into it and they're really getting into their role like they're in the theater, and then you have someone next to me that's like, It's
you got
not,
like the
it's not
monotone
conducive.
reader too. You got the person that doesn't change the inflection at all. It's
I'll say this: you would have a couple people and they were normally the same people with the same personalities. They really got into it. It's like they were preparing to rehearse.
They were
for
the worst kind of people, Ryan. Like,
what
because then it makes you feel bad. Then it makes you feel like you are doing not enough. And listen, we had amazing teachers at our high school. Like, we had a lot of really cool people there, but like that was my one bad takeaway was just the table reads. Like you said, I don't mind reading it if I have to, but when I have to perform it, that's when I draw the line.
like so like you have someone reading Hamlet, right? And you have like Queen Gertrude, and they're like, "Good Hamlet, cast thy nighted color off, and let thine eye look like a friend on Denmark. Do not forever with thy veiled lid." See how stupid this is, number one. "Seek for thy noble father in the dust. Thou know'st 'tis common, all that lives must die, passing through nature to eternity." And then you got some guy who really doesn't want to be there in the first place, has to read Hamlet. "I, madam, it is common." And that's it. And you got one person to... It doesn't work. But listen, whatever makes people happy. If it makes them happy to pretend that they're Hamlet or whoever else, far be it from me. This is not a reading podcast, though. This is not Reading Rainbow, the podcast. So let's get into something we know a little more about. And that's sports, I think. So we had Super Wildcard Weekend. Oh, yeah, super. And the first game was closer than anybody would have imagined. Indianapolis traveled to Buffalo. Buffalo was able to have fans for the first time all season. And they managed to pull out a close win, 27-24. And this... Okay, number one, I don't think the Bills beat the Colts. I think the Colts beat themselves. There were a lot of opportunities for them not really to run away with that game, but to win, and they really didn't take advantage. But this is the difference in Josh Allen of last year and Josh Allen of this year. They won this game in part because of how much better Josh Allen has gotten at the quarterback position. And we could tell, like last year, he lost them the game against Houston. But this year, his performance helped them pull out a close win against a surprisingly tough Indianapolis team. And so now they advance to the second round of playoffs. I'm happy for you, Buffalo. I'm rooting for you guys. But, Matt, Indy, they put up a much better fight than I was expecting. This game was a lot closer than I thought.
Yeah, and you could tell that Frank Reich and the rest of the coaching staff was trying to pull out some trickery every now and then and utilize a lot of the playbook to try and keep themselves in this game. And a lot of people, I mean, everyone on our staff pretty much wrote them off. You know, they were the only unanimous pick was Buffalo. And you mentioned Josh Allen, and he had a clean game, right? And that was one of the things was accuracy and turnovers over the past couple of years. And you know, he looked really good. He only missed, on my math is correct, 9 passes, and they looked really clean and crisp. And again, I'll say it, not every game's going to be a blowout. You're going to have to play close games, even in the playoffs. Even if this is against a team that had to win and get in Indianapolis, I said last week it was going to be a blowout, but again, I'm just happy they won, right? And this is coming from a guy who's in the same division, who has seen for the past 2 decades the Patriots beat the crap out of them every week. But I'm really happy for the fan base because, listen, Buffalo fans are some of the most charitable people out there, right? They did a piece on it on, I think it was NFL Network a couple weeks ago. Like, they're always donating, contributing to communities and organizations, and like, you just want to root for the Bills. So like, I have no problem saying like I want because especially coming from a divisional rival, I have no problem saying I want them to succeed. I really like Josh Allen. You've come full circle, Ryan, on your Josh Allen takes this season, but yeah, go Bills. The Colts did beat themselves in a lot of different ways, but I don't know. It was kind of hard from the start to try and go in there and win in Buffalo with fans there. It was kind of stacked against them.
Frank Reich was he was one of the decisions he made was talked about a lot, both at the time and then after the game. So it was a 4th and 4. They were at the Buffalo's 4-yard line. It was 10-7 at this point. And they had a 3-point lead. It was 10-7, and then it was at the end of the half. Basically, there was under 2 minutes to go, and a lot of people. The thought that he should have just taken the 3 points, but instead they went for it. They didn't get it. They almost did. Rivers had to face some pressure. He got it to Pittman in the back corner of the end zone. It went right through Pittman's hands. He had to stretch out a little bit for it. It wasn't the easiest catch in the world, but you could tell that it was possible to make it. Regardless, Buffalo then in a minute and a half drove 96 yards and took a 14-10 lead into the half. That I make that decision 10 times out of 10. I think going for it there was the right thing to do if you're Indianapolis. I mean, you're a 7 seed going up against an offensive juggernaut in Buffalo. A field goal, I know that they lost by 3 points, but the point is that a field goal, that doesn't help you, I don't think, in that situation. You need to be able to score 7 points against this Buffalo team as much as possible. So I commend Frank Reich for not being a coward and for trying to get his team the momentum and go up 17-7. And I think if you blame anyone in that situation, you have to blame the defense. You can't let a team drive 96 yards in a minute and a half and take the lead going into halftime when they get the ball to start the next half. So I commend Frank Reich. He got roasted for some of his decisions, but I thought that his coaching performance was good, and I think that he is still the right guy to lead that team.
Yeah, I didn't really get the scrutiny for that either. I mean, so much to where I didn't really even have that as a takeaway because I thought it was the right decision. And you're right. They had pretty much a top 10 defense all year, banking on them going pretty much the entire length of the field to score. The likelihood of that happening statistically would be kind of rare. So I agree. And especially when you're on the road, like you said, Ryan, you're on the road in the playoffs, you got to be more aggressive. If he was the home team, I would say kick the field goal. You could play a little more back if you're at home with fans, mind you. It's a little different this year, but we're seeing a lot more coaches kind of adopt this aggressive mindset of play calling on fourth downs and especially in the red zone. And for the most part, I know I got on Mike Zimmer early on in the year, I think it was, for that Seahawks-Vikings game, but for the most part, I'm kind of fine with it. So if people say that Frank Reich isn't the guy, Ryan, and I've heard talks about Flores and some of the other guys, listen, there's a lot of great coaches that currently have these jobs. Frank Reich and guys like Flores are one of them. So the culture in great hands with him. And if I were a fan, I wouldn't really. You made a face, Ryan. Did I make a bad take?
Breaking news on the podcast. We got a scoop. Doug Pederson has been fired as the coach of the Philadelphia Eagles. So the Eagles are now looking for a head coach. I'm going to steal Soundtown's thing. We got a scoop. We broke some news on the podcast. So, wow.
Okay, Ryan, so I'm going to finish the point that I'm just making because it just qualifies for what you just said because you could hear me laughing in the background. Doug Pederson, I think, fits into that category of a good coach that's qualified for his job.
I'm glad we get to discuss this. I don't know if you saw the report that came out today.
What, the Jets won?
No, so the reason that Lurie wanted to have another meeting with Doug today was because he wasn't convinced about Doug's vision for the future. So, Matt, you know as well as anybody, because we talked about it every week, you've heard me talk about it, the Eagles this year were not a good football team. And so what Doug wanted to do to rectify that situation, he wanted to promote Press Taylor, who was the quarterback's coach this year, to offensive coordinator, so that in-house. He wanted to promote Andrew Briner from pass game analyst to quarterback's coach, in-house hire. He wanted to promote Matt Burke from defensive line coach to defensive coordinator, in-house hire. Or he wanted to bring in ex-defensive backs coach Corey Unlin back from Detroit and make him the defensive coordinator. So essentially an in-house hire. If that's actually the case, now I don't know who this report comes from. There's a theory going around that Howie leaks this stuff to the media to absolve him of all blame. I do kind of buy into that a little bit. But at the same time, if this is actually true, you could not bring Doug back. If Doug thinks the way to fix a 4-11-1 team is to promote guys in-house, that's not how this works. You need to bring in you need to bring in an outside perspective, clearly, because the team has regressed heavily since the Super Bowl. Oh, and he also wanted Dave Phipp to remain the special teams coordinator after they just were awful all season long in that department. So apparently Lurie was underwhelmed, and this all comes from Jeff McClain of the Inquirer. And so I guess it all culminated in Lurie not being convinced about Doug, and now he's gone. So, wow.
Yeah, what a busy week for Jeff McClain, Ryan, ever since last Sunday night. Here's the thing, right? I'm all for in-house hires when you're good, and you've alluded to this from the opposite side. When you're a bad team, you can't promote in-house, because I'm on the opposite side for a number of years. The Patriots, all they would do is just promote guys. It's what they did when Patricia left, Flores got promoted, so on and so on. But I agree, now that you've elaborated on this, Ryan, if that's the case, I don't really know why they would keep him. I will say if it's something different, I kind of disagree with that, because you have to understand that now you're behind on the coaching interviews and the coaching carousel. Now you got to kind of book these interviews quickly, because some of these guys are going to start going off the board. So I don't know why the meeting occurred so much later than the end of the season. I guess, you could tell me if I'm wrong or not, but I don't know. Just a confusing situation. I get the fresh start thing, but yikes, Ryan. Oof. It's just funny how his job security went from 100 to 0 in a week.
Yeah, it's a little weird. That I agree with your point. It's what I thought about too when these rumors started coming up that Pederson might not be safe. You're already so far behind in the head coaching search. Like, some of these teams have been preparing for this for weeks. So now they have their candidates. They have the interviews all set up. Some of them have already interviewed these candidates. Well, now if you're the Eagles, as you said, you're so far behind. Who are you going to bring in? And actually, I'll go even a step further. Who would want this job right now? This organization is in complete disarray. The roster is garbage. If Howie Roseman's still there, the front office is still a clown show. What makes this more attractive than any of the other head coach openings? I'd argue, Matt, that this is probably the least attractive head coach opening in the league right now out of the 7 that are there.
Yeah, I was about to ask you where this ranks among the others. And I mean, you look at teams like, the Jets, Jacksonville, top 2 picks right there. You're going to have a fresh slate pretty much with the roster with those 2 teams. The Chargers, you have a franchise quarterback there, right? And they looked competitive. So yeah, I agree with you. Even the Houston opening is more appealing, and they want to trade their franchise quarterback allegedly. So, or at least he wants out of there. So I agree. You're going to get the bottom of the barrel, I think, on this, unless one of the coaches wants to come to Philly and coach in a bigger market. But you mentioned it. Some teams were preparing for weeks. I would argue teams that knew they were tanking have been doing this for almost the whole season, right? I mean, I know you don't go into the year knowing you're going to fire your head coach. I'm not saying that, but there's got to be there's been eyes on guys like Eric Bieniemy, and all the other hot names out there, Robert Saleh. There's been eyes on those guys for the past couple years. And these teams that had, guys like Adam Gase, Doug Marrone, you can't tell me that they haven't at least been thinking about it. So, like I said earlier, to go from it's Doug a week ago to this, I think you guys are screwed in this process. You really are.
Well, we'll see what happens. This is a crazy day for this organization. From winning the Super Bowl basically 3 years ago, almost 3 years ago in 2018 against the Patriots, to now the head coach is gone. The organization is a dumpster fire compared to the other organizations in the league. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see, although I will say if they are intent I wonder what this means for Wentz now, because the report came out last week that their relationship was fractured. So now I kind of wonder if this means they're going to try to fix him and not trade him. I wonder if Wentz is more apt to want to stay here now and not be traded. But if whatever the case, if you're going to try to fix the guy, you need to bring in a fresh offensive mind. I don't know who that would be at this point. I mean, the guys that you mentioned, they're not coming here. I can tell you that. There's no way Andy would let Bieniemy come here. Number one, he would not let him do that. So I don't know.
But Ryan, here's the issue though: is you can't say that you're going to keep Wentz because you already benched him, unless you say it's going to be an open competition come July. I mean, you're in a really tough spot here, because what if the head coach comes in, really likes Carson Wentz, and starts him week one? You're going to lose half the locker room right off the bat because those guys love Hurts more than Wentz.
By the way, my prediction is that Doug Pederson goes to the Jets, so I'm just getting that out there right now. If you start... My problem with this is that it seems like they're not going to fire Howie. I think if you fired Howie Roseman and just started completely fresh, the Wentz thing makes more sense. But you do make a good point that with the way things are currently structured, there's clearly still an issue there. So, yeah, wow. That's Doug Pederson, no longer the head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles. As I said, I think he's going to the Jets. That's my prediction. Do you have any predictions? Do you think he'll be a head coach still in 2021?
You win a Super Bowl, that gives you a leg up. And I still think he's a knowledgeable football guy. I mean, he at times his play calling and the plays he called didn't work out. But, like, again, as I was making the point before we broke the news, there's some guys out there that are just better than the options that are available, or at least, the grass is always greener on the other side, but this grass is currently green kind of thing. I still think Pederson can be a good head coach somewhere. So who knows? Maybe with the fresh slate in New York, like you said, that could work out. And I agree. The Jets are going to want a guy with that kind of pedigree to try and install some winning vibes in that city. So, and he won't have to change his wardrobe that much because it's the same colors. So that works out for him too. And he probably wouldn't have to move, just a short commute up the turnpike.
So here's a stat or a fact from Kalen Jones of The Ringer, and then we'll end with this. Doug Pederson is the first head coach to get fired within 3 years of winning a Super Bowl since the Baltimore Colts fired Don McCafferty after 1972 season. This almost never happens. So that's just to show why this decision is so paramount, why this is, despite the rumors, why this is still so unexpected. As Jones said, this doesn't happen suddenly. So I don't know if we'll ever know what really happened to this organization over the past 3 years, but now it's time for a new chapter. It seemed like Doug was going to be here for a while. And it's kind of weird. I mean, Chip lasted here 3 years, and it seemed like we had Doug for the long haul, and Doug only ended up lasting 5. So another head coaching opening in the NFL. A team that should have a head coach opening right now is the Seattle Seahawks. They lost 30-20 to the Los Angeles Rams in the wildcard round. I'll give credit to 3 members of our staff, Caroline Mattice, Jillian Young, and Ross Anderson. They were the only 3 out of the 18 we asked to pick the Los Angeles Rams, and they started 2-0 because of it. The Rams, after losing John Wolford, had to put in Jared Goff, who just had the pins put in his thumb, and the offense suddenly looked like it did in the past. It was really firing on all cylinders. The defense played a big part in the success. I don't want to discredit that. Their defense has been such a joy to watch this year under Brandon Staley. But, Matt, the Seattle team, for about what seems like I want to say the 6th or 7th straight season, their season just ended just like that. They clearly underperformed. This was not a 12-4 team. They finished 12-4. This is not a 12-4 team. And I think that if you're Seattle, you really need to make a change with your coaching staff. Apparently that's not going to happen. But if I'm Seattle, I really would look hard at changing the coaching staff, because I think, just like the Eagles, this organization needs to start fresh too.
Yeah, so when you look at, so I'm going to kind of go outside here for a second with this take. We talk about Green Bay and how they're always quicking out, New Orleans quicking out, right? You don't really remember them in the postseason, and Seattle's in the same boat. Pretty much all of these three teams, Ryan, in the NFC, I mean, I'm trying to think of the last time any of them made the Super Bowl, right? Because you go back the past couple of years, it was San Francisco, then the Rams. Like, it's these one-hit wonder kind of teams that kind of came onto the scene a little bit. Go back further, the Eagles, Atlanta. I'm probably missing some teams in there, but I don't have it in front of me. But regardless, like, these traditional NFC powers don't really win. And I know New Orleans won, whatever, we'll talk about that, but it's just constant disappointment from a lot of these teams. And one, they might change my mind this year, right? Because two of them are still in it. But Seattle, as you mentioned, this isn't the first time it happened. And they've kind of got the luck of the draw in the past with some of the teams they've played and all that, but they were really missing the advantage of having the 12th man. I think that's number one and paramount. I think that definitely plays a factor. I also think that it's a really bad look that you lose to a guy who came in, who was the emergency quarterback, didn't have a functioning thumb, and came in and led them to a victory. Granted, the defense, as you mentioned, accounted for some of those points and really made it difficult for Seattle. I want to get ahead on this take, Ryan, because I've already seen it and we're going to see it. It's not Russell Wilson's fault. Like, the guy has been dealt just a crappy hand almost every single time he's been in this situation. And yes, I will agree. He benefited from the Legion of Boom, but so did everybody because it was a historically great defense, right? I mean, certain situations he'll benefit from it and it'll put him in a better position to win, but I just don't think it's his fault. And then, as you mentioned with the whole Pete Carroll thing, I mean, he wants to run the ball more. And you're taking the ball out of the hands of your best player. And it's not a disrespect to the running backs they have. I mean, I'm a huge Chris Carson guy. He's on my fantasy team. But, like, it's not his fault. It really isn't. I don't know what it is. I mean, whether it be the offensive coordinator or just play calling. But, I mean, they're in the same boat as Green Bay and New Orleans for the most part, to where it's just these quick exits.
You brought up a good point about how, like, this has been going on for a while. I want to point this out. So after they won the Super Bowl, 2015, they made the playoffs. They won against Minnesota because Blair Walsh missed a kick. That's putting it lightly. And then they lose in the next round to Carolina. So they were lucky to even make it to the divisional round. Next year, they beat a Detroit team that shouldn't have even been in the playoffs to begin with. They lost their last three heading into the playoffs, and they lost 26-6. It wasn't a good game. And then they lost to Atlanta in the divisional round. 2017 didn't even make the playoffs. They were 8-4 in December. They lost 3 out of the last 4. They collapsed. 2018, they made the playoffs and they lost to Dallas in the wild card round. 2019, you beat Josh McCown, and then you lose to Green Bay in the divisional round. And then this year, we talked about what happened. At some point, you have to figure out what you want your organization to be. If you're happy with just making the playoffs every year, and you're happy with going 10-6 and losing in the wild card round, maybe winning one round, Pete Carroll's your guy. That's cool. I get that. Some organizations, that's what they want. But if this team actually wants to win a Super Bowl again, and if they actually want to make sure that Russell Wilson is still there when it happens, they need to make a change. Russell Wilson's been hamstrung by the Seattle Seahawks for almost his entire career on the offensive side. Pete Carroll, and initially it was Darren Bevel, now it's Brian Schottenheimer. They have not helped him at all. It's hard to watch their offense and watch him in that offense because I just feel sad. They're wasting all of his talent. And so for Pete Carroll to say, oh, you know what we need to do? We need to run the ball more. That should be grounds for firing right there. The GM should have come out immediately right then and fired him on the spot. But it seems like they're going to run it back next year. I'm going to say the same thing I did in my NFC West preview. They're going to win double-digit amount of games. They're going to make the playoffs. They might win a round and they're going to lose in the divisional round. That's the ceiling of this team as it is right now. This team, as currently constructed, is not a Super Bowl contender, and we learned that this year. They started off hot, and then they just faltered down the stretch again.
Yes, I know a lot of people won't really want to go that far to fire Pete Carroll, but you want to look at just the offensive coordinating side of it, Ryan. You mentioned Darrell Bevell. You could correct me if I'm wrong. He's in Detroit, right? Or he was or is this season. And look at what Detroit did offensively, right? I mean, it's not just a one-time thing. And people always associate the Seahawks with what they were when we were in high school. The team that went to the Super Bowl in back-to-back years and, should have won both. This is coming from a Patriots fan. Should have won both. I don't know. It's just I didn't have the courage, Ryan, to pick the Rams. And you mentioned the people that deserve the shout out for picking the Rams. I did not go that far, but I don't know why I picked Seattle. It's like, in the regular season when we both love the Falcons, they're the Falcons of the postseason. We love them. We're going to hammer the pick, and then we're going to be disappointed when they lose. So it's just sad, like for their fan base too. You win 12 games. They're just such a big tease. You got to give credit to the Rams, though. Their defense is great. I think they're going to give Aaron Rodgers a lot of issues next week. Wouldn't be surprised if they won that game either. So, yeah, just another disappointing exit for Seattle. I was not really surprised when I watched the game.
As you said, this team will travel to Lambeau to play the Green Bay Packers. That's the first game of divisional weekend. That's at 4:30 on Saturday. The next game... This was also closer than I thought it would be. I thought Tampa Bay would win this game by at least 20, and that didn't happen. The legend of Taylor Heineke grew over the course of a few hours, and then some things started to come out after the game. But it was still fun to watch this guy that most people had never heard of come in and keep it close with Tom Brady and the Buccaneers for as long as he did. Eventually, Tampa Bay pulled away, but Washington, I'll give them credit. Everyone was saying that they didn't deserve to be in the playoffs. They were 7-9. They were a weak team. They put up a fight. And I'll give them credit. But Tampa Bay clearly was more talented, and I'm very excited to see what they're able to do next week against the team we'll talk about in a little bit.
Yeah, Tampa Bay getting their first postseason win since the Super Bowl back in 2002. So happy for Tom. Very, very bitter moment for me watching him succeed somewhere else, but also happy for the guy. Taylor Heineke, by the way, former New England practice squatter. So him and Tom they talked about it during the game, somewhat of a relationship. But yeah, the Washington's a feisty team. I've been saying it for the past couple months now. Their defense is going to keep them in a lot of games. Their front seven is one of the best in the league. And all they had to do was just have good quarterback play to make it close, and they got good quarterback play. Now, I wanted, for anyone who thinks that he's the guy, stop. Because they still don't fall in love with this guy after one game. He's only made 2 NFL starts. He was really good in college. I get that, but don't bank on one game kind of thing. Maybe have him as a backup, maybe, right? But, I saw that take. Some people say, well, Washington found their guy kind of thing. They didn't. Stop it. It's not Alex Smith either. So, yeah, Tampa Bay. The least exciting, actually, no. The least exciting game of Saturday, not the least exciting game of Super Wild Card Weekend. Also, shout out to Caroline, Ryan. I believe she's the only person to get 5 out of 6 right from our picks. If my memory serves me correct.
She might be. I would have to go back and double check. But, I mean, she started off real good. She started off 4-0. And then, unfortunately, she did pick a team that we're going to talk about in a little bit. That was the least exciting game that I'm sure you're referring to. But, yeah, so congratulations to her. I think you are correct that she's the only... Oh, well, no, actually. No. Jill also picked 5 correct. Jill and Ross got 5 correct. They were in contention to go 6-0 until the final team dropped an egg last night, but
So they have a 2-game
yeah,
advantage on all of us, is what you're saying.
yeah, I got to do the math. I'm not good at quick math, but
Well, most of us picked what we picked, which was Buffalo, Seattle, Tampa, Baltimore, New Orleans, and Pittsburgh. So there's 2 losses right there.
yeah. So good for them. They're off to a fast start, and we'll see if they can keep it up next week. Sunday's game, the first game I thought was going to be a kind of an offensive fire show, and it wasn't that. It was actually kind of a defensive chess match for most of the game. Baltimore ended up winning 20-13 over Tennessee. This was the game that was caused the biggest split, I think, in our staff picks. It was the smallest majority, if I remember correctly. And Baltimore did end up coming out with the win. Lamar Jackson finally got his first playoff win, so we can cross that off the list. We can stop using that narrative against him. It was not his best effort from the quarterback position. There was that one throw early on in the game. I never saw Joe Flacco throw a pass that badly in a Baltimore Ravens uniform. And you know what? Give credit to Lamar. He bounced back. He did lead the team to a victory. He rushed for 136 yards on the ground and a touchdown. I don't know really what the defense looked very good. I don't know if I'm very confident in them going into Buffalo on Saturday night and pulling out a win, but they were able to at least make it to the divisional round. We'll see if the offense can score a little more against Buffalo. I highly doubt it. But I think the bigger thing for this is Tennessee now. They obviously made the magical run last year. This year, I mean, you were kind of on this all season long. You were never really fully impressed with Tennessee. I was always a little higher on them, so it's upsetting to me to see just how their season kind of ended with a thud just like that. But I do like the players they have on the roster. I do like their coaching staff. I love that Tannehill is really progressing to the quarterback that he is today. And I'm excited to see what this team can do next year already.
Yeah, it's crazy with the team with Derrick Henry and all the other pieces they have, Brown at a wide receiver and Tannehill, who's made the necessary steps. It's hard to sit there and say, well, they still need more. I still think they need more to compete with some of these other teams. To me, they just don't have enough juice, right? They just don't have enough firepower to really compete with Baltimore and some of these other teams. Granted, I don't think Baltimore is much better than Tennessee, but they showed it yesterday and looked pretty well and solid. And you're right, the Lamar Jackson throw, I texted it, I think, in a group chat. As soon as he threw that interception, I'm like, all right, here we go again, kind of thing. Why did I talk myself into the Ravens? They're going to choke again. And to their credit, they bounced back. He had that nice run to really start mounting this momentum that they had. Tennessee had a hot first quarter, Ryan, only scored 3 points the rest of the way, and it came in the fourth quarter. So clearly, I mean, I know they had issues on defense at times. Offensively, I know they kind of go cold sometimes, but I just think they could continue building, then they could kind of be there down the road. I think the magical run last year, I really think any of the teams in the field last year could have beaten the Patriots. I think a lot of the teams last year could have beaten the Ravens last year. I'm not discrediting what they did. I'm just, as a Patriots point of view, I mean, that Patriots team sucked last year. So, at least offensively. So, I think they could continue building, and they could become a perennial power in this division with Tannehill, especially him being on the younger side. I don't see why not.
Well, Matt, we transitioned from that defensive chess match to what was the least exciting game of the weekend. It was always going to be the least exciting game of the weekend. And the only reason I think there was some intrigue to it throughout the game was because Nickelodeon was doing a broadcast of it as well, which it got rave reviews. It seems like everyone really loved the Nickelodeon broadcast, and I'm interested to see if they go back to it again at any point. Maybe, if not for the NFL, then for some other sports. The Saints were able to handle the Chicago Bears, who just had nothing on offense. They weren't able to do a single thing, which isn't surprising. 21-9, the final score. So this led to a rematch for the third time this season. Tampa Bay will travel to New Orleans to play the Saints, and We all know week one, they lost 34-23. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers did. That score was a little closer than the game actually was. Their next meeting, they got blown out 38-3. But this is a different Buccaneers team. For me, at least, this is the game I'm most excited for next weekend. This is the final game. This is at Sunday at 6:40. I'm excited to see if Tampa Bay can finally get over the hump. It's just something in my head. I find it very hard to believe that Tom is going to lose to the same team 3 times in one season. I can't see that happening. I really think Tampa Bay is a different team, and I think they have what it takes to compete with the Saints now.
I mean, I don't think that ever happened in New England, that he lost to a team 3 times in 1 year. I mean, the only time that would happen is in the playoffs against a divisional opponent, and that year against the Jets when they lost in 2010, I'm pretty sure they won one of those games that year. So I don't think that's ever really happened to Tom, let alone lose twice to the same team in one season. I'm happy you really didn't talk about this game that much, because if it weren't for Nickelodeon, Ryan, I don't even know if I would have kept it on my television, right? I mean, we all kind of watched it growing up with it. Definitely the most exciting part of the game. I think they'll run it back for the Super Bowl. I wouldn't be surprised if they try and do that or some other kind of way. Noah Eagle, our age, doing a playoff game, so no one should smack talk millennials. We're out there doing it. But yeah, I mean, the Saints look good, but I also think the Buccaneers, like you said, look better. I flip-flopped on this pick twice already since this game went final yesterday. So don't ask me yet who I'm picking, but yeah, Mitch Trubisky sucks, the Bears suck, and the Saints got a bye week. So there you go. Congrats, New Orleans.
Well, luckily we were saved by the final game of the night. So Cleveland was without their head coach. They were dealing with COVID all week long, and they weren't able to practice. This should have been a game that Pittsburgh handily won. They should have ran away with it easily. And yet what happened was eerily reminiscent of that Super Bowl between the Seahawks and the Broncos. The first play of the game, not counting the kickoff, Marquise Pouncey snapped it over the head of Ben Roethlisberger. The Browns jumped on it, and that was all she wrote. The Browns ended up going 28-0 in the first quarter. They took a 35-10 lead into halftime. Ben Roethlisberger threw the ball 68 times. 38-year-old Ben Roethlisberger has not that tied him for third on the all-time pass attempts in a single game leaderboard. That tied him with George Blanda. By the way, Matt, here's a trivia question for you. Not part of our sports trivia, but do you know who has the most passing attempts in a single game?
Was it recent or no?
It was a few years before we were born.
You always ask me. I have no idea. I'm going to say a few years before. Is it by like a known quarterback or by like someone that...
Yes.
Okay.
You might kick yourself if you don't get this one.
Why? Is it a Patriots quarterback?
It is.
It's probably Drew Bledsoe.
Drew Bledsoe threw the ball 70 times in a single game. That remains the all-time record for pass attempts in a single game. But Ben Roethlisberger gave him a run for his money. Remember, Bledsoe was not 38 years old when that happened. He was a youngin'. Ben Roethlisberger, at 38 years old, threw the ball 68 times in a playoff game. I know they had to, because you can't run the ball when you're down that much, but that's still very impressive. Matt, the Steelers, we were correct. As the season went on, we started using the F word with them late in the season, and we were correct. They were frauds. There's no reason this team should not have won this game against Cleveland, and that they found some way to choke, and now Mike Tomlin has cause to get fired. Matt, I can understand the argument. I know you're not ready to give up on the guy, though. I'm not, but I can understand the argument.
Well, Mike Tomlin, first off, is one of the most respected people in the entire NFL. I mean, the guy's never had a losing season. He's been, I think, outside of Bill Belichick, the motto of consistency in the NFL, right? I mean, those guys have to be 1 and 2 over the past couple decades. And Tomlin's done it quietly, right? Because Belichick's winning all the Super Bowls, but, Belichick has a losing season. That's something that Tomlin doesn't have. So I wouldn't go that far yet. I think he's a really good head coach. I will say, though, there has to be a point, Ryan, and I'm going to say it. I get he threw for over 500 yards and 4 touchdowns, but there has to be a point where they say, what's next? Is Mason Rudolph the guy? My answer to that would be no. And you made a face to that would probably be no as well. So then you have to start planning for the future because this guy's, as you mentioned, 38 years old, threw the ball 68 times. Mind you, coming off of shoulder surgery in the offseason, I don't know how that was possible. They've adjusted kind of the style that they play at. It's a lot more short yardage stuff and yards after the catch. Clearly, with that situation, Ryan, you're going to run into certain situations where passes are tipped because there's a lot of guys at the line of scrimmage and balls get intercepted. When you're throwing those short passes like that, people aren't going down the field. It's going to be more compacted. You're going to have more turnovers. And then you blink and it's 28-0. So that's my thing. You have to start thinking. I'm not saying go away from Ben just yet, but just start thinking about a contingency plan. Because the Browns aren't going anywhere. Baltimore's not going anywhere. Cincinnati's going to have a year off waiting for Joe Burrow to come back. But you gotta capitalize on some of these guys that you have, like T.J. Watt and, Hayward and all these other guys on defense that are playing really at a high level. Minka Fitzpatrick, and I don't know. For me, it was the offense all year. It was why they were the F word, frauds. And it showed. It's a shame. But, the team that started 11-0, Ryan, I haven't seen a collapse like that really ever. It was 4 out of your last 5, then you get trounced by a team that hasn't made the playoffs in 18 years.
I'll say this. You look back at their recent history, 2017, they got the number 2 seed. They had the same record as the Patriots, but everyone remembers what happened in that game in the middle of December. And then they go in, they get the first round bye, and then they lose to Jacksonville 45-42. The next year, 2018, they are 7-2-1 at one point, and then over the next 4 weeks, they proceed to lose 4 out of 5 games. So 5 weeks. It drops them from 7-2-1 to 8-6-1. They missed the playoffs because of that stretch. Last year, I don't count because they had nobody at quarterback. And I think it's impressive that they were able to finish 8-8. I give a lot of credit to Tomlin for that. This year, they started 11-0, as you said. Once again, they lost 4 games in 5 weeks, and they go into the playoffs and they lose in the first round. So I understand why, when you look at Tomlin's, how the team has done since they won their last Super Bowl, if you're expecting them to win a title, I get it. The guy hasn't been there in a while. I understand. But I can't give up on this guy after this year. Now, if the same thing happens again next year and they falter, okay. At that point, okay. But I think you got to give this guy one more year. I'd love to see him with a younger quarterback that can actually do more than Ben. I'd really like to see what that offense could do. I know that's not going to happen next year, but I can't fire Tomlin at this point. He's a top 10 head coach in the NFL. He has his flaws, like most coaches in this league, but I like him a lot. So I can't fire him after this. Although I will say it's very embarrassing that this team lost to Cleveland with all the circumstances.
Yeah, and I think the knock on Pittsburgh, not for this current run, but back, I would say earlier on in our college days, and even in high school, is that sometimes they play a little too conservatively, right? Especially on defense, they'd run the zone, and then Tom would go in and pick them apart. And I think the one year they got blown out in the AFC title game because they played zone, and Tom went in and shredded it up. So I don't, obviously, when you go down 7-0 on the first play from scrimmage, you're kind of on your heels right off the get-go. But I said the same thing about Tom last year and Drew Brees this year. Obviously, Tom can still throw the deep ball better, but you need a quarterback to have the confidence to throw the ball deep. And Ben can do that at times, but the short, conservative play calling on offense is kind of hindering them in some ways. And I think that's part of the reason why they turn the ball over so much, because as I said, there's so many guys in that short yardage situation. It's all about timing, and, if something happens, a ball gets tipped up in the air, there's a lot more guys there to catch it. So I feel bad for Tomlin and the fan base, but yeah, I'm not ready to pull the plug on it yet. But I'm just saying, start thinking, Pittsburgh, about the future at quarterback. Just start thinking.
I think they should have started thinking several years ago, but listen, that's why I'm sitting in my room at 2:45 on a Monday, and those people are making the decisions. Cleveland's reward for winning their first playoff game in years is getting to travel to Kansas City on Sunday afternoon. The game is at 3, so Cleveland, I hope you enjoyed winning that playoff game because your run is over. But listen, you won a playoff game. There's positives to take away from this season, and this team should be here to stay for a while. I know the NFL stands for not for long. Things change so quickly. I mean, we saw with the Doug Pederson thing that we talked about. Things change very quickly in this league. But the Browns seem like they have the talent to be here to stay for a while. So we have an intriguing slate of games next weekend. I have always liked the divisional round. I think it's one of the best 2 days for sports. I think it's up there on my list. That could be something we do one episode. But the divisional round, the wild card round, you have teams that barely snuck in. They probably shouldn't be there. But the divisional round, in theory, should be the best teams in the NFL. It should give you the best matchups of the season. So I'm excited to see what happens. Matt, gotta reach for the box. Okay, all right. Let's see how you do this week.
Yeah, here we go with some more hockey questions about what year they switched to 2 referees and more hyper-specific questions that I just have no idea the answer to.
Well, I'm glad that you brought up hockey because that's coincidentally what your first question is going to be. What is the diameter of the rim of the Stanley Cup?
I have absolutely no idea. And I'm wearing a hockey jersey for all the people watching right now or listening. I am wearing a Boston Bruins jersey in the event that we might slip hockey into the program. I have absolutely no idea.
Do you want to take a guess? If you just want to think about
24. It. I have no idea. I don't even know. What is it measured in? Inches? Feet?
Yes.
I have no idea,
inches.
Ryan. All right, it's going to be bigger than 24 inches then, I think, but I have zero idea.
Surprisingly, no. It's only 8 inches in diameter, so...
I don't even know. The last time I learned diameter, Ryan, it must have been like 8th grade. So clearly that's rusty. And then...
Oh, okay. Well, here's a good one to get you back up and running. What football position does Tom Brady play?
Quarterback.
All right, there we go.
Back on the board.
Which was the first team to win 3 Super Bowls?
I'm going to go with Pittsburgh as my answer.
That's correct.
Yeah.
All right.
Look at that. The timing, too.
How many basketball games are played in a regular WNBA season?
Well, they just upped that. How recent is that? They just changed that number because now it's 36 after the new CBA. So
what was it before?
Oh, man. 33, I want to say.
34.
All right. Well,
Yarker, I will say I'll give you credit for that one because this question was not okay. In any case, when was the 2-point conversion reinstated in the NFL?
I have no clue. Absolutely no clue.
The answer is 1994. True or false? This is a fun one. A Pittsburgh Penguins game once had to be postponed because a fan snuck an actual penguin onto the ice. True or false?
False.
That's correct. All right. See, that
I would think
try to trip you up.
I would have remembered that YouTube video if that were the case.
How many games are there in a regular NHL season?
Wait, can you repeat the question? I wasn't paying attention. How many games are in a regular NHL season?
Yeah.
82.
That's correct. Now here's one that I know you're not going to be excited about. How many double stitches are there on a baseball?
I don't know. And then Zach's going to text me and say, Matt, you suck at math, and because he got the question about baseball right last week. I don't know. I don't know how many. I don't take the time to look at the double stitches on a baseball. I just take it and throw it. So I have no idea.
The answer is 108.
That's great.
Here's a good one to get you back on the board. What is the flat rubber disc known as in ice hockey?
It's the puck.
There it is.
The flat rubber. I've never heard anyone describe a hockey puck as a flat rubber disc.
All right, and your final question for the week. From end to end, how long is an ice hockey rink?
Oh, God. I should know this, too. Again, I have no idea. I'm not good with these measurements.
The answer, would you like to take any guess just to see
I don't want to
if you
embarrass myself, Ryan. I don't know it. Okay, just, we're going to move on. We're going to take the L.
200 feet.
All right. Did you know that? You watch more hockey than I do.
I said 180, and it was 200.
Well, you were one question off then. You would have got the baseball stitches one if you would have just switched up.
Yes. All right. Well, that'll do it for this episode. We're taking a week off from Disney Plus and Glenn. We just wanted to take a week off. Pretty soon, we'll be starting the Jersey Shore and Matt portion of the podcast. I'm excited for that. But I want to thank you for listening to this episode. Be sure to check out bestavailableplayer.com. Got a lot of fun stuff going on over there. Podcasts, written stuff. We're going to have videos stuff coming soon. Everything that you could possibly want and more. Bestavailableplayer.com. Want to, once again, thank you all for listening. We'll catch you guys again next week. We'll see if we get another scoop. We'll catch you guys again next time.